We have another math tutorial for this day, and I opted not to show my face because I want to show you all the solutions that we're going to have for this equation. So we're going to try to solve a quadratic equation in three different ways. What I would suggest before you do solving the quadratic equation, you can try to test it yourself to verify what's the value of b squared minus 4ac. This is actually what we call discriminant. Discriminant. Discriminant would tell you that if this value here is less than 0, this means to say the quadratic equation has has no real solutions. Technically, you would get an answer or x value which is an imaginary number. Imaginary number. When this value here, the discriminant b squared minus 4ac is greater than 0, this means that the quadratic equation has two real solutions. So when you say real solutions, these are real numbers. And lastly, if this is equal to 0, the discriminant equal to 0, this means to say that the quadratic equation has one real solution. So these are the specific values or specific nature of the discriminant. So just do a review in these process here in this concepts here because we're going to apply it here in our given. So first, we have first method here. We're going to do first method, which is factoring. Factoring. All right, so I'm going to change the color of my pen into a different color. Okay, so what we're going to do here, guys, is try to write first like this. So like that. I'm gonna write x here and x here. The reason is that when I multiply x and x, it's just x squared. Okay? Now, what I'm gonna do here, what numbers or what values should I place here, should be the factors of the third term in your quadratic function. There's only two factors of 5, which is 5 and itself, which is actually good. But in reality, guys, when you do factoring, think of the factor of the third item, and when you add them, the result is the middle term. So let's try to check that. The factor of 5 is just 5 times 1. And if I'm going to add these two, what is 5 plus 1 is just 6. So that's the middle term. So basically, the sign that we're going to do here, it's going to be plus. And we're going to do equal to 0. To continue solving the x values, we're going to apply the zero product property where we can equate both factors to 0 and like this. Okay? And then solving for x for each side, we have -1 and x is equal to -5. All right, so we have two values of x for this quadratic equation. Now, if we're going to apply these here, these discriminants, notice that our function is in the form let me just erase is in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. This is the standard form for quadratic equations. So it follows that our a here is actually 1, our b is actually, what, 6, and our c is actually 5. So if we're going to evaluate the discriminant, guys, so we would have 6 squared minus 4a, which is 1, and c, sorry, which is 5. Let me erase that. This is equal to 36 minus 20, if I'm not mistaken. What is 36 minus 20? I think that's 16. 16. And you know that 16 is what? Is greater than 0, right? So here it follows that when your discriminant value is greater than 0, the quadratic function should have two real solutions, in which the real solutions are -1 and -5. Okay? So we are able to solve the equation, I mean, the solution for this quadratic equation using factoring method. This time we're going to be using completing the squares, completing the square. So these are the methods to do completing the squares. What we're going to do here is I'm going to change first my color of my pen. So um, we're going to transfer this constant to the other side. To do that, we're gonna subtract 5 on both sides. So x squared plus 6x plus 5 minus 5 equals 0 minus 5. Simplifying both sides, we have 6x equals -5. All right, so how to complete the squares? We're gonna add a third item on the right side. So we need to determine what's going to be the the term here. And whatever term you are going to place here should be the same term you're going to place on the blank here. So how to do this? To do this is you need to solve for b over 2 squared. B over 2 squared. Remember before that our b is actually equal to 6. So what we're going to do here is going to be x squared plus 6x plus 6 over 2 squared equals -5, sorry, this should be plus, this should be plus 6 over 2 squared. So simplifying both sides here, we have x squared plus 6x. 6 over 2 is 3. Squared, you get 9. This is equal -5 plus 9. And this is now a perfect square trinomial in which we can factor this, applying the property x plus y equals, I'm sorry, x plus y squared equals square the first term plus twice the product of the first and second term plus square the second term. So if we're going to pattern this one here, this would look like this. X squared plus 2 times x times 3, right? Plus 3 squared. So in other words, this is just the same here. So this can be written as x plus 3 squared. So this is going to be just x plus 3 squared. So I'm going to write it here. X plus 3 squared equals -5 plus 9, it's +4, right? And how to solve for x here, we're going to take the square root of both sides. So x plus 3 squared equals 4. Take the square root. This is plus minus square root. This becomes x plus 3. Cancel out 2. This becomes positive -2, right? So, and then we're going to solve for x here. This becomes x equals -3 plus -2 plus minus 2. So this becomes what? We have two values of x, -3 plus 2, and x equals -3 minus 2. What is -3 plus 2? That's x equals -1, and x equals -5. So technically, our x values are just the same using the factoring method. We're done with the second step earlier, which is using the um, completing the square. The first method was doing the factoring method. This time we're going to be doing the quadratic formula in solving for the solutions for this quadratic equation. Quadratic formula is given by this formula, -b plus minus square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Remember that our equation is in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, where our a is what? 1 here. Our b is 6 here. And our c is actually 5. So we're going to plug in these values to the quadratic formula and then solve or simplify it to solve for the values of x. So let me change the color to a different color. So here, this becomes what? X equals negative 6 plus minus 6 squared minus 4ac. Sorry. Instead of writing a, I'm going to write a is 1 actually, and c is 5. So let me extend the radical symbol here. And notice that this term here, this expression is just actually the discriminant over 2 times a. Our a is 1. So let's simplify first the terms inside the radical symbol. So this becomes 36 minus 20, right? Over 2 times 1 is just 2, equals negative 6 plus minus 16, because 36 minus 20 is just 16 over 2. And we know that the square root of 16 is just 4, so we can write it as negative 6 plus minus 4 over 2. So we have two values of x's. We have negative x plus 4 over 2, and we have x equals negative 6 minus 4 over 2. Simplifying these two values of x, we have negative x plus 2, or rather, negative x plus 4 is just negative 2 over 2, and the other one is negative 10 over 2. So our x is negative 1, and our x here is negative 5. There you go. So in other words, to solve for the equation, which is quadratic equation, to solve for its solutions, you can try to use the three steps. The first one is factoring. The second one using the completing the square, and the third one is actually what? Using this formula here, the quadratic formula. That's it, and I hope it helps you a lot.